FilmStruggles is an experience-based podcast where we ask all the questions an early filmmaker would make.
With a new guest every week, from experts to people that are starting just like us.
We cover different topics like motivation, work balance, networking, and so much more.
We discuss what to do, what not to do, and how to turn struggles into action.
I am Claudia.
And I am Gabriel. Welcome to FilmStruggles.
Starting your own business. When is it the right time to consider creating a production company? What to consider? How long does it take? On today's episode of FilmStruggles, we're going to be talking about creating a brand for yourself and what it takes to start a production company in the film industry.
We had a very interesting conversation with Jayme Pfahl, a producer with almost 30 years of experience in the film industry. Jayme has a background in theater marketing and publicity, with also an extensive number of credits as a producer for comedies, dramas, features, documentaries, and reality-based television. Currently, he is the senior instructor for producing at Vancouver Film School and agreed to sit down with us to share a little bit about his experience navigating the production company universe.
Most of my producing experience has been as a student. By being in the school, a lot of things are a little bit sorted out for you. You get the guidelines, you get the resources, you even have the insurance and all that. So you just have to focus on more on the script and the project. But it was once I finished film school, the very first thing we did was enter a 48-hour competition. It wasn't until that moment that I actually realized that it was not only about the script or having the people and the team together. Especially I realized this when I wanted to get a location, that I needed to have a production company. And within the production company, the business license and the insurance and so many things that came along. And what we did, it was have a production company. So my first question is a production company suitable for everyone when they want to start creating?
I think eventually everybody has to have a production company. I don't think you can exist in this universe of filmmaking, whether it's episodic or shorts or web series or whatever it is that your passion is, without having the infrastructure of a production company behind you. It's going to limit you by not being a company in the sense, for many reasons, but one of the big ones is that a lot of financiers are not going to give you money unless you are a company. They're looking for having that, within a corporation, there's certain infrastructure that provides a protection and liability from investment. And even though, you, Gabrielle, might be the only person in that company, the fact that you're a company gives them comfort and protection. And it is something legally that they're sort of looking at. So you can probably make a lot of shorts and, some independent stuff on the fly, sort of that guerrilla filmmaking. But if you are going to get more serious, you're going to need to be a production company in order to get any real financing, even small amounts from, let's say there is some sort of fund from Creative BC for some development and it's only, $2,000. They're not going to give it to you guys unless you are in a production company. You don't have to be established or even have anything necessarily in your resume. They're looking for that sort of confidence that there's a legal entity there to protect them at the end of the day.
Yeah. Speaking from the considering if you want to go for a more professional endeavors, and then you have to put the professional name by using a production company name to it. How to find the right people to associate. I know, I said, very quickly in the beginning, who should you associate with in order to have a good production company. But I'm asking this because I had a production company experience when I was in Brazil for college. Just getting different friends from different backgrounds trying to raise something from scratch. So exactly what you just said, apply for different fundings and try to look more professional and send a more put together image and message out there. But then again, because we were all friends, it didn't work because we were more friends than colleagues or coworkers or anything like that. So I feel like creating a production company, especially in the indie universe, you always face this issue of the right people to associate with. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's tough to put a production company together that's multiple people. Especially the owners in that sense of who are the sort of the I mean, you can hire people to do support for you. You can hire development people. You can hire front of house. You can hire production managers, all that sort of stuff. But if you're looking at somebody to bring on as your partner, I think it does become complicated because you're looking at people that have the same vision. They want to do the same thing. Are you creatively on the same page? Can you, I think one of the biggest issues in starting out a production company is that everybody has to eat and everybody has to pay their rent, right? So what often happens, especially earlier in people's careers, because they're trying to survive, they end up taking, day jobs or taking a show and working as a PA or, in a camera department.
Yeah.
Even though what they really want to do is start that production company and getting it off the ground. And then what happens is that everybody's sort of scattered, or if there's three of you, two of you are off doing another show while, you're sort of sitting by yourself trying to keep the company going and no money's coming in. I've seen companies where they've set it up where, if somebody's off working on another show, a percentage of their wages goes into the company. So it meant that, if the three of us were working together and I was off on a show, part of my wages would go back to you guys to go into the company. It wouldn't probably pay your wages, but it would help keep the company going because now 1/3 of the company's gone. And unless that project I'm working on is for the company, there's no benefit to the company except I'm paying my rent. That's the only benefit, and it's really only to me. But that's tough to ask people, even if they're really passionate about the company and keeping it going, to say, okay, you're going to do this job and you have to give us back 25% of your money in the company. But if you really seriously want to be a partner in a company, that's sort of what you have to do. Or you also have to go, you know what? None of us are taking any jobs. We're going to give this a year. We're going to see if we can pitch ideas. Can we get stuff off the ground? Have a business plan? Can we, if we get so many projects together, can we make enough money with overhead and with fees that we're going to be good to keep going into the next year? I sort of also feel quite strongly that I wouldn't rush into necessarily creating a production company with partners, because you can always partner with anybody on any project, right? Okay. So, the three of us, if we want to work together, can get together and work on a project. We can pretty much get the same wages, own the same amount of copyright, and do exactly the same thing we would do as if we were all in one company without becoming a company. Okay. We sort of dissolve at the end of that project. We might decide, hey, let's do it again. And maybe if we end up doing that 2 or 3 times, we might go, let's make this more formal. Let's, obviously we work together, things are working out. We've got a really good vision and a good vibe. So let's actually do this formally and partner together. But it also might be that after you've done a project or two, you might find out that you absolutely don't want to work with that person. That as much fun as they are, maybe that is all they are, is fun, that they're not really responsible. They're not going to be there. You're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're off at some cabin on the weekends or doing whatever they're doing, and not really delivering, and still yet own a third of the company or half of the company. So, like I said, you can hire people if you're big enough by yourself. You can have a staff that fills in a lot of those gaps, or simply go from production to production,
from project to project,
project to project, create little companies as you go and see who you like to work with and who you don't like.
This creation of temp companies, is this a common practice in the film industry? Because I've never heard of anything like that before.
Yeah, so it's sort of weird because, and as far as I know, there's no other word for it really. Production companies, and then there's what we refer to as the Prodco, which is also a production company. So production companies in their heart or at their core develop ideas, and that's all that they really do. That's the reason they're created, is for producers or directors or whoever it is that's come together to option material, develop it, pitch it out there into the industry, try to get the financing. Once, for every single project that you have ever seen, probably not smaller projects, but anything that's got some money or you've seen on an OTT or you've seen on broadcast or in the theaters, has its own company that's Prodco, production company, that's created specifically for the project.
Yeah.
So, even if we work together, even if we were all in one company together, we would create another company to shoot our first project. And that's where the copyright would be held. And that's where all the contracts would be held. And when we're exploiting the project, all the money would flow through there and then would come back to us as producers. You never produce out of your own production company. Again, they're the same word and the same thing, but of your core production company where you're developing ideas, when something goes to camera, you create a new company that holds the copyright. And even on something on an episodic or a movie that would have prequels or sequels, every single new production has a new company. So something like Supernatural, I mean, how many years have they been going now? Like 11, 12? I don't know how many.
Yeah.
I think it's 15 years or something.
15. So there would be 15 production companies for Supernatural that were created. For every single season, there's a new company that's created. The copyright is transferred, or there's legality that comes to make sure the copyright is secure and carried through. So that's something that happens all the time. So whether we are going to be together or we're going to work separately as companies, we're still going to create a company at the end of the day to shoot the project that we want to shoot once we know that we have financing.
Okay.
I have this idea of there's kind of this main production company, which is sort of like the roof, and then from that one you start creating like small companies. Is this big company still necessary, or you just go from project to project?
So there's a couple of reasons why you want to do it the way it is, and some of it you're right. I mean, it's a legal thing. It's just sort of the way you want to work your contracts. But for producers, we often, I mean, most producers, even if they're by themselves, would have, 4 or 5 potential projects on what we call their slate that they're developing. And some of them are going faster, some of them are slower. You suddenly bump into somebody at a film festival that's looking for a horror movie, and you've got a horror movie. So you didn't think anybody was interested, and now somebody's interested. So you, as a producer, you generally have multiple projects sort of in the pipeline at various stages all the time. If you created, it's not that expensive to create a company. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, at least in BC, and to set it up. But you're incurring costs continually. And I would say, roughly by the time you set it up and you do some year ends and you do a little bit of paperwork, even if you're not making much money or it's going ahead, you're probably spending about $1,000 potentially a year just on that company. So I can create my company and develop 100 projects for $1,000 a year, plus obviously the expenses that would be attached to an option or, writing fees and stuff like that. But if I had to create right away the company, I would be creating 10 production companies, which would cost me $1,000 a year. So I'm already spending $5,000 roughly, keeping those companies alive so that I can develop ideas. And then if the ideas don't go, then I have to dissolve the company, which costs money as well. So now you've got more money that you're spending. So ultimately, what I'm trying to do is minimize costs. So I can develop multiple projects. Again, obviously there's costs to the projects, but I don't want to incur the costs of incorporation, because the only reason I need to incorporate above my personal or the core company is in order to go into production for financing and all the contracts that I'm going to put together. So I'm really eliminating a lot of expenses. And the other reason why you want to do that as well is that any contract that you have with any sort of key position in all your financiers, in there will be some wording somewhere that gives them the option to audit your books. Should they feel that they don't really believe that the money coming in is flowing correctly, or you've given them a cost report and they don't really think the money's where it should be. If all of your money and all your investment and all of your profit was flowing through one company, and I want to audit your books, Claudia, I would be able to see every deal, every show that you've worked on, every bit of money that you've spent, where it's going, how much you're paying every single person you've worked with, stars, and that's nobody's business. Every project is, different. I might pay you $10,000 to be my producer on one project, and Gabrielle $5,000 to be my producer because I got a better deal, and maybe I feel he doesn't have as much experience. But that's not his business or your business to be looking at people's other deals.
Okay.
So you want to keep it separate. And that's also with the series and sequels and prequels and features or spin-offs or whatever you want to call it, is that you might have different investors. And again, you want those investors to come and look at all the books, past deals, because somebody gave up a deal from year 1 or year 2, and now you've got a new financer, doesn't mean they should be privy to the negotiations that you did on those previous projects.
Okay.
So it saves you money, but it also, sort of protects you once those projects go into sort of keeping things more compartmentalized.
Okay.
Yeah. In a box.
Now that we are entering a little bit more in the like legalities of a production company, because I've never went through the experience of opening a production company or talking to someone who did the step-by-step of opening a production company, I have a feeling like it is very hard and very difficult. Is it really as hard as it sounds? Because it's putting a name and making indie films under a name online is something. Making a proper production company and writing contracts and signing contracts is another thing completely different. Is it as hard as it sounds? It is as complicated as it sounds?
Well, the actual setting up of the company is not hard at all. It's a little late to put our application. Well, actually, we might be able to get our application in today, and we would probably be incorporated by Friday.
Oh, so it's a quick process.
It's a very quick process. I mean, they're really looking at one thing. Is there any other company out there with the same name in BC? And if there's a conflict, they'll send you back the paperwork. Generally, they ask you to give your first, second, third choice for company name. So if your first one doesn't work, then they'll go to the second one. Because if you only give them one name because you're confident it's going to go through, and they can't, then they're going to charge you a full fee again to sort of.
Okay.
Or if you ask for a numbered company, sometimes if you're in a real hurry, you can just say, just incorporate me. And they'll just go, okay, on the shelf, we've got, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 BC. There you go, you're done. And then you can change the name after you're in production if you want to or need to. But the actual setting it up is really straightforward, unless you start to have partners. So again, if the three of us were going to open a company, then there's other things we want to think about. Are we sharing equally these shares? And then you want to put it together, which I think is really important, even if we were the best friends in the world and got along, which we do get along. So, right now it seems great, but what if, we want to get rid of Claudia, Gabrielle? What do we do? Not doing anything, So how do we get rid of her out of the company? Because we want to or if we want to bring in a fourth partner, how does that work? So all of that stuff is part of a shareholders agreement that would be our partnership agreement that you'd want to put into place when you've got multiple people that are not, your partner, significant partner, or if you're not just by yourself. So it can become complicated. You don't need to have that all in place to incorporate. That's something you can add to the incorporation after the fact. So but as far as opening up a company, you can do it pretty much overnight. It's really, 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 really fast. And yes, well, the contracts and the legal, and as far as, actors deals and directors deals, that's sort of a whole new element that's not really part of setting up a production company, because that would be hiring an entertainment lawyer or working with some business affairs person that could help you out in that sense.
Okay. And I know you have already mentioned about like all the profits and having profits and expenses on the company. What happens if your production company is only having expenses, but you are not maybe yet receiving any profits? Do you need to have any sort of income or something like that, or no? Okay.
No. You're going to, once you incorporate, you're going to have to file with Revenue Canada in Canada, and every country around the world will have some equivalent of that that sort of monitors corporations and once they're sort of set up. But yeah, I mean, if we started a company tomorrow and we didn't get anything into production for a year and a half, it doesn't really, I mean, obviously that's not great because we want to be making money and working and getting our projects off the ground. But as far as the corporation goes, it doesn't matter if it's making zero. At the end of the year, you'll just file a zero year end with no money being brought in. And even you still might even have no money brought in the sense that if you make some money and you have expenses you can offset against it, you still might be zero at the end of the year as well. Because as a corporation, there's things you could potentially write off that you can't write off as an individual sitting at your home working by yourself. So you might even have made $10,000 a year, but had $10,000 in legitimate expenses, and therefore your year end is still zero. The government doesn't really care as long as your filing and everything's done in a proper manner.
That's okay. You can continue with your company.
Yeah.
Okay. Talking about like more now into the strategy, is it a smart just everything that comes your way you put it on the same roof, or is it more like brand yourself towards a different project? I don't know.
So I think that's, I think it's frustrating sometimes for people who are producers, directors, or filmmakers who want to start a production company and they're starting out. That I do think that the reality is that you need to focus a little bit about what you really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can do everything, even if you're interested in everything. And it certainly does go back to, as you said, branding. It's like, so, if you've made a whole bunch of kids' family movies and then, this horror comes across your desk and you make a horror movie, and then I'm looking at your website, I'm going to be like, what? It's like, it's like, so I thought you made those cute teddy bear movies, and then here's this person getting stabbed with a butcher knife on the website. So, when people are looking for partners or even financiers or investors or studios or distributors are looking at, can you deliver?
Mm-hmm.
They're also looking at what you've already done. And it does become confusing.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can, diversify somewhat, is that if, you wanted to, you don't have to necessarily just do feature films because and not do episodic, but I think you want to stay on brand and think about what that brand is in the beginning and sort of try to figure out what you're going to be happiest doing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the industry out there is segregated in the sense that the executives that you need to talk to for financing, even at one company, will be the feature film department will be completely different than the episodic department, which might even within the episodic department have another department for children's programming as opposed to, rom-coms as opposed to documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
So on top of all that, if you are making documentaries and music videos and children's programming and a horror, not only is it confusing branding wise, but you have to know like 1 billion people in the world in order to have all your meetings, because everybody's sort of spread out all over the place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it can be sort of done, but I think you just spend your entire time trying to chase your tail, trying to figure out who's going to give you a yes answer.
Yeah.
And as frustrating as it might be for creators or filmmakers to try to stay in a couple of lanes, I think it really is the smarter way to go. You do want to step out of that lane and do something different. And you do see it not generally in the beginning, and of course, I can't think of a single example right now, but I do know that there are examples out there of production companies that have stepped out of their lane and they create an entire new brand, totally different name. If you look at the websites and the information, it's the same owners, the same producers, but they've now decided that what they want to do is something completely different, and they want to be known under that umbrella for being romantic comedy producers while they're doing, primary children's programming under their other umbrella, which really don't go together. So I think in the beginning, it costs you a lot of money. I think it's tough, it's confusing. So I think you want to try to focus somewhat. But if you do want to expand, I do think you need to honestly start a brand new production company. Could be with, like I said, all your same partners, but you want to find some way to set yourself apart from not only other companies, but your own company that's doing something else.
Speaking of branding and like putting your production company out there, do you have any like big yeses and big no-nos into like putting yourself out there as a production company and branding yourself in the internet, on film festivals, how to present yourself?
Well, I mean, I think you should really think carefully about what you want to call yourself, because you can rebrand your entire name and company, but it is interesting out there. I mean, people know, producers or companies by, the people who make the projects, but they also know them by the company name, right? And especially if you are not a necessarily smaller company, but if you start to get big enough, so it isn't smaller, big enough that you're actually starting to hire other producers. Like I could hire both of you guys to produce for me under my company name. It wouldn't be your show, but you're working for me. So my brand is expanding without my name. So, if people say, well, Jayme, you did that show, it'd be like, no, actually, Claudia did that show. But it is my company's project. So the branding sort of goes back to that. I don't even know why I started to talk about that on that line. I think I was going to go somewhere and I didn't really go, but I do think that's important to keep in mind. I think having a name that's, you are happy with is really important, that you can explain what it means without
Okay.
being embarrassed. I would do some research, at least a little bit, to see whether your name translated into another language, that it's not offensive or a swear word, just to make sure that, you're not offending an entire market out there, which could happen. That's what I was going to, because you can rebrand yourself, but I think that you're known by your company almost more than you are by yourself at a certain point if you're successful, because you are hiring other producers. See, I knew there was a point to all of that. So think about what you're happy with and what it means. One thing that you can do is, if you feel like you're going to, expand a little bit, then, adding some word like entertainment to your company name, or studio to your company name, even though you're not really a studio, it's you in your basement in your underwear
Yeah.
doing what you're doing. When somebody looks for that and you say, well, yes, we do music videos and we've done a commercial and, we're doing this, then having the word entertainment is a bit more broad, where if you say, if you're making Claudia pictures, and then I really feel that that's what you do. And that's not a bad thing, but if you do want to, if you're thinking in the future that you might want to be more expansive in what you're doing, I think that you want to think about using one of those words that gives you a little bit more freedom when people are looking at your name out there. But going into the marketplace, I think you have to try to put yourself everywhere. You have to be very consistent in your imaging. So think about what images you're putting up on your website. There's no reason for anybody not to have a website now. It is so easy to put it up. I mean, it may not have all the fancy bells and whistles, but that can come in the future.
Yeah.
If people search for you online, they need to be able to find you. And IMDb is great, but IMDb only shows what you've produced or that has been confirmed for production development kind of thing. So all the work you're doing, what you're looking for, really what your company is about, none of that's going to come from IMDb. All they're going to see is a list of shows that fall under your company name. So I think IMDb is very important and we use it all the time, but for a producer, it doesn't show the full scope or story of what you're really doing out there, because it only shows what's already really been done or is in production or done. So think about that. I think it's a weird thing to say, but I do really believe that business cards are still really important to have, because a lot of our business or a lot of our industry and how we are successful or find our next project or find new people to work with is through networking. And sometimes it's at film festivals or a party or some sort of event. And yes, people have their phones and they put that in, but there's nobody in the world that's going to stop in the middle of a cocktail party and wait for you to type in your address and name and your email address and all of that. So give them a business card. Yes, they're going to throw it in the garbage probably. Hopefully they'll recycle it actually and not throw it in the garbage. But they'll have the information and they can enter it into whatever system that they want, at the end of the day, and they've got your information. If you don't have something like that, and again, they're really cheap, there's no reason not to have a business card out there. I think that you're just losing opportunities because people are going to forget who you are or what it is who you were when they met you, sort of thing. So even though we live in a digital world and everything's electronic, and even more so now, all this stuff on Zoom, I think when we do have those face-to-face and we're in those events and those meetings and they will come back, you do need to have something you can quickly give somebody, and even I know people that will on the back, like if they're in there pitching they've got a doc about something, they will actually write a little bit on the back of the card about what they were going to or did talk to that person about and have them pre-written on for the things. So they look at your name and they go on the back, it's like, oh yeah, we talked about that web series that really briefly, so they sort of jog their memory as well. So it has a sort of you haven't sent them an email, but you've given them a little bit of information and they have all your contact information. So I think getting out there, having a website, business cards, I think are really important. And again, branding yourself, what your logo is, and sort of, and being faithful to that. Because then what will happen eventually as you're more successful is people will just see the logo and they'll know who that company is, right? And so I think that's really important.
And funny that you tackled the business card topic, because people tend to say that it's an old-fashioned thing, but you have no idea like how many times like in the early stages, me and Claudia were like in the networking spot and we meet someone and then they give us a business card and we're like, oh, we don't have one to give you
Yeah.
back. So we should definitely consider business cards. Everyone should consider.
Yeah.
Everybody. Yes, I think so. Yeah. I mean, what did I ran into or we met somebody at an event a while ago and their business card, all it said on it was creator. And then it had their email address and phone number. I don't know what the hell that means. I mean, does that mean they're a director or they're a writer or they're a producer or they're production design?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was sort of clever because I think they were starting out, if I remember right, they were starting out and sort of, out there working the room. But I thought it was very clever that they were branding themselves as a creator. And very simple. It was a white card, their name in one word and some information for contacting them. So, but even that definitely helps at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And do you think, like, so taking this as an example, that it was plain and it was white and it was like very, like, you can tell that this person maybe was starting on his career. How much can that hurt? Like, just to pretend that you know what you're doing, even though maybe you're starting, or how can you balance that?
Well, I think you definitely want to always come across like you know what you're doing, even if you don't. I mean, I don't think I would pretend like I have a big office somewhere with a staff of 20 because, if they do stop by the address on your business card and it is your house and, you answer the door in your bathrobe, then that's truly embarrassing. And I don't think anybody really cares whether you have a staff or stuff like that. But I think, just being confident and responsive, when anybody asks, I mean, that's really what people are looking for, is people that they can believe in their projects, that if they invest or come on board or, agree to partner with on the idea, that they're going to have somebody who's passionate about that idea. So I really think a lot of it is that the confidence and passion that you put forward on a project really helps, you get it across. I don't think you have to pretend that you know everything, because I also think that people don't I think that comes through really quickly. Again, depending on who you're running into, you're probably going to be meeting with people that have a lot of experience. So you definitely want to sort of not get caught in that. I mean, I think you never want to oversell your ideas or your concept. I don't think you ever want to oversell yourself, but confidence goes a long way. One thing I do say when I've talked to people before who are starting out is that, when you're in a meeting and somebody, you're in a pitch meeting or whatever it may be, and they ask you, do you have this or have you thought about this? Or, let's say, do you have a budget for this or anything like that? And you don't, you should never say you don't. You should, first of all, just make it up on the spot because they're never going to know that you are making it up. So just go with it, give them an answer. Hopefully it won't sound too ridiculous, but give them an answer. Or if they say, do you have a production schedule or do you have, a synopsis and you haven't written that synopsis, then go home and write it and send it to them the next day. Just say, yes, we'll send you, tomorrow, or we're working on the budget. We've had a few passes. We're not quite happy with where the numbers are falling. So we get that to you early next week. I think we should have a pass that we would feel comfortable for you looking at. And then you go home and you start working on that budget that you have not started at all and have no numbers whatsoever. But now you're going to do it. I don't think you ever want to sit in a meeting. That's part of that confidence. You want to sit in the meeting and say, yes, I can get you that, or I can do that, or yes, we do have it. Let me get that to you as quickly as possible.
Because sometimes I think I want to show that I am starting and that I'm maybe eager to learn, but sometimes I don't know where... what I should be presenting or how.
I also think that as you become more comfortable and as you get more experience, those meetings are just going to go better. Doesn't mean you're always going to get a yes by any means, but they're going to go better. And just through your knowledge and your confidence in your conversation, they're going to know that you know more or what you're talking about. But I would say that I don't think there's ever been a project that I've worked on where I didn't learn something new. So I think and I've done tons of projects over the years, and all kinds of projects, and everyone has their own challenges. Every one of those projects has something that I'm surprised by, or completely throws me off my game. So you're never going to run into anybody who can deal with every single situation or has been through every situation, because it changes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you should feel that you should be that concerned about that, because I think in your confidence, your passion, and your enthusiasm for the projects you're talking about, I think that goes along longer to give them confidence than you trying to fake it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And if they really like the project and they really like you and they feel that there's something that you're not strong enough in, financiers and distributors and investors, especially in your earlier careers, have no problem telling you to go find somebody as a mentor or an executive producer. We love this project. We want to move ahead with you guys, but we need somebody else from out there that's going to give us some confidence. So, they're not going to give you that and go, gee, I hope they figure it out. They're going to go, we love this. We think they're great. We just want that extra little bit, behind me. And I've been on many projects as mentors, in front of that executive producer, and they all really vary. I've been on projects where basically I've had to handhold the producers throughout the entire thing. They really had no idea what they were doing. And thank God the financiers said, bring somebody on board. And then I've also been on projects where the producers absolutely did not need me. And they were really, I was just there to calm the financiers, to know that, and I was involved, but I wasn't really that involved on a day-to-day basis. They really did run the program, the show at the end of the day. And I just came in at different parts and, different meetings. So, it really depends. Just because they ask you also to bring somebody on board doesn't mean you have to acquiesce all of your power as producing. Just make sure you're clear with them is that we've got this. They just need the confidence that you're here. But we are really going to do all the work.
Thank you a lot, Jayme, for giving us all this advice.
Can I give you one more?
Yes. Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
This has nothing to do with starting a company, but I think it goes into being a company and being your brand and stuff like that, is that when you're in a meeting with somebody and you're pitching a project or you're having some sort of chat with them, they're definitely not always going to say yes to the projects. But they oftentimes will say, this doesn't feel like it's a project for us. When you're ready, come back with something new. Or they'll say, or if you're having a chat with them out somewhere, you might say, we've been working on this idea for blah, blah, blah. And somebody says, that sounds really interesting. When you're ready to pitch it, please come back and see me. I would say 99.99% of the time, nobody ever does that in younger producers and directors and writers. If I think they feel that because I said no to their project, I'm just being polite by saying, please come back with your next project.
Okay.
But the fact that you actually got a meeting is a huge accomplishment. And the fact that you're in the room chatting with somebody is a huge accomplishment. Okay. It means that you beat out hundreds of other people to get into that room that day. And so the project doesn't work for them. Maybe they've got something that's very similar. They thought it was going to be a little bit different, but it's almost something they already have. But when somebody says, follow up, we'd love to see your next project. When you finish developing that, bring it back to us. That's an opening with somebody who wants to see what your work is. And it's shocking to me how often people don't follow up or keep in touch because it's so hard. I mean, our whole industry not our whole industry, but a lot of our industry is about networking. And when you're given that opportunity and a door has been opened, and then you just leave it opened and walk away, I'm just astounded that people either don't believe you or I don't know. I don't get it. So please follow up. Okay. If somebody said, what are you doing next? Or I'd love to see your next project. Take them up on that. They're not, trust me, they're not going to say that if they don't want to see your next project.
Yeah.
So, nobody has time to have a bunch of people come in that they know they're going to say no to right away. So when that door gets open, shove your foot in there and make sure your foot stays in there and do make that follow up. So.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that last thought.
Oh yeah, thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to give us a review and share this with someone you think might need it.
Also, share with us your favorite quote.
You can find more information about the podcast and our guests on the website FilmStruggles.com.
Remember to follow us at FilmStruggles on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Thank you for listening.
See you next week with a new guest
and a brand new struggle.
FilmStruggles is hosted, produced, and edited by Claudia Hernandez Barragan and Gabriel Sousa Nunes.
Executive producer is Gerson Carranza and sound design by Sebastian Sagastumi.